Hi, everyone. Our careers and lives can take many twists and turns. We learn a lot about ourselves as we grow and evolve into who we are becoming. Sometimes we learn through experiences, traumas, education, people, influences in our lives. But ultimately, I think we learn the most when we get really true with ourselves. My guest today, Kit Maloney, has been in the world of women's health and wellness for over 20 years. Over the past 2 decades, she's been an academic, entrepreneur, victim advocate, and pleasure activist. Kit earned a master's degree in gender and social policy from the London School of Economics and has been featured widely in the media, including Glamour, Self, and Bustle. In fact, Marie Claire named Kit an amazing woman for her work celebrating women's sexuality. After experiencing for herself the tremendous healing benefits of vaginal steaming, Kit set out to help spread the word of yoni steam magic all over the world by launching her newest venture, Kitara. Kit is absolutely a serial entrepreneur, and if that resonates for you and you've been on many career paths, you're really going to love today's episode. So listen up for today's episode on clarity, that path to finding your true north with Kit Maloney. And as always, be sure to subscribe and leave a review for the Mindrise podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and Google. Enjoy. All right, guys. So the amazing Kit Maloney today. I'm already giggling because she, of course, just like any other recording, you imagine people don't hit record as soon as they get on. Like the recording starts when they're like, after they've said, hi, how are you? And all the things. Yeah. And Kit and I are already giggling about like, so we're going to talk about the WTFs. And Kit's like, yeah, I've got plenty of WTFs. Right.
Sign me up. I can share about WTFs.
So let's welcome Kit to the WTF show. But I am very excited to have Kit. We have you on with us today so that we can kind of talk about the behind the scenes to what it means to find your path, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Full body chills of resonance and excitement, Bailey. Thank you so much for having me. I'm already just overjoyed with it. So thank you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And you know, I think that one of the reasons why you and I, we've known each other for years and coming on and being on the podcast today. And I said, you know, we're going to have a conversation about how we have gone through our path and what's brought us to where we are, because there's been a lot of twists and turns on your path so far. Right? Right.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your business, but more importantly, like tell us about the catalyst that took you from where you were to where you are now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Thank you for this opportunity. My current business is called Kitara and is hosted at kitaralove.com. And we celebrate vaginal steaming for womb space healing. And we make beautiful, expertly crafted products to support safe and easy in-home yoni steaming. And we can go and talk more about that, but that is what I'm currently doing. The journey there has been over a decade on the entrepreneurial path. And really, if I go back far enough, really since I was a little girl, certainly in my teens, was very aware that I wanted to do good in the world, but through the lens of empowering women. And that journey in my early teens took me to being a victim advocate on my college campus and working with the administrators and local police and writing my thesis around how to make the campus safer, and very, very active in that capacity, to the point I'm kind of giggling. I can sort of see the college president and his love. Definitely there was no hate between us, but his love and like, oh my gosh, this girl's got a lot of energy and is going to keep on knocking on my door until we do something about it. So
she's very passionate.
Yeah, very passionate, very passionate. And so that journey brought me to get a master's in gender and social policy from the London School of Economics. There, I just dug into gender theory and had such an amazing time expanding my awareness around really hierarchical systems. We talk about gender theory and feminism, and often the focus is around women, but it's really a structural lens of how we set up society to denigrate and elevate certain individuals in it. And so I just absolutely loved that time, getting a whole year to just jam about the topics that mean the most to me in the world and write about them. And all of that was wonderful. But at the same time that this track is happening, this other track in my life is happening, where I had entered college understanding that this passionate viewpoint I had around keeping women's bodies safe, particularly at this time when we're meant to be exploring and learning in this gift of higher education, that I found the numbers of sexual assault on college campuses just appalling. And so I went onto campus knowing about that, knowing that was work I was going to be doing, really identified also with this aspect of myself that had not been a victim of sexual assault at that time. And really was a rallying call for, we can't let only victims and survivors take up the torch here. We have to be allies and elevate them, because they're going through their healing journey. And how do we step in and support? In the middle of that journey, in the middle of my college experience, I was assaulted. And at the time, I couldn't reconcile so much of what was happening to me, but certainly not the identity shift. And so I held on to that for 15 years. And it wasn't until much later on that I came to make peace with that, which I'll get to in a moment. So here we are, I'm in London, I'm studying gender and social policy, but I'm also going through this inner turmoil about how to understand what happened to me, how to place that in my own awareness of self-identity, and wanting to keep going in the mind space, in the academia, right? Like not wanting to be in the body. I look back at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I was doing. I was like, I will study my way out of this. And
there was like a syllabus for what you're learning. There's no syllabus for a person who's been sexually assaulted. Yeah. There's no like, exactly, so here's what you do.
Yes.
In semester one, like, no, that doesn't happen. That doesn't exist. No,
exactly. And this is, not to overly date myself, but this is 2005 when I'm getting my master's. And so we are, what feels like eons away from any sort of Me Too movement. My line in college was one in one. Every woman has a story. We put these false hierarchies on what little T trauma is and bigger T trauma is and all of this stuff. But like, we've got to start listening to women and women on campus. And that was kind of, in hindsight, my attempt at articulating what we now understand as Me Too, which is so wonderful, and has given us this new lexicon and this cultural shift where there is now more of a baseline ability to believe women that really wasn't at the cornerstone of our understanding of sexual assault when I was navigating all of this in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so at that time, I, had loved this master's program, but then over here, going through my own shit with myself, and I just took this massive break, and I went to work for a really new company in the soft drinks world. I mean, totally a WTF. And I was like, look, I've always had this leaning towards, starting new things. And so can that translate into the business world? And I worked directly with the founders of a company called Fever Tree, which is an all natural tonic water soft drinks brand that at the time, I was their first sales person. And now is this like multi-billion-dollar company, which is so cool that I can be proud to have knocked on doors for them. And it's a great product, but it's tonic water and ginger ale and ginger beer. And while that's wonderful to make without all of the junk that's in standard tonic waters, ginger ales, and ginger beers, it was not in my soul's purpose to stay there. And so I found myself having been transferred from London to New York with Fever Tree up one night and thinking, gosh, I've loved this opportunity. I've learned so much on the sales and marketing side of things and entrepreneurship in general, working with brilliant founders. But WTF, why am I selling tonic water?
Right.
Kit Maloney was not sent here in this lifetime to sell tonic water.
Right.
I got to get back to working on what I have known since I was a kid, which is that I really want to be engaged with supporting the empowerment of women worldwide. And yet I'm still stuck here because I know I can't, what for me felt like, go back to working on issues of sexual violence because I knew I wasn't safe there. I couldn't handle talking about violence all day, every day. And because I hadn't processed my own trauma. And I had some consciousness around that. I had absolute clarity that I could not talk about sexual violence all day, every day. And so instead, I had this moment where I realized, could I imagine the world without sexual violence in it? What did that look like? How could I start creating that now? And that sent me on really my first big entrepreneurial moment, which was to start a company all about sexual pleasure and using and utilizing female pleasure, female orgasm for our safety, healing, and empowerment. That was a wild ride. It included trying to address adult entertainment, otherwise known as pornography, from a feminist perspective and celebrate women filmmakers in the adult space. All of that was, again, super wild, aspects of it incredibly wonderful. That company is still going. It's in transition. It gave me so much. But what it really did, like I'm sure you, Bailey, and so many of the people you interview, these entrepreneurial journeys are initiations into our own healing. And that I went into this wanting to focus on pleasure so that I could avoid my trauma. And spirit, my path, whatever you want to call it, had different plans. She sent me into this so that I could dig into my trauma. And so that was another like W2F, because I had a podcast. I'm telling you, I've got a lot. I had a podcast that was all about pleasure. It was like the Actually Pleasure podcast. And I would bring on these amazing women who have pleasure-centered businesses, and they would share with me their stories of trauma. And I felt like I couldn't get away from it. And it wasn't until this interview I had with Anita Kopach, where she was telling me her trauma story, but from a place of really being on top of her story and in genuine gratitude for where she was in life. And I was so blown away that night I just cried my eyes out on my living room floor and was like, I have now seen somebody who has broken out of a victim survivor binary that has never really felt so juicy and empowering and enlivening in my own body. And I've seen the possibility of getting to a point in a healing journey that looks like something I deeply want. And that started that moment, years into focusing on pleasure as a profession. I then dug into dealing with my own trauma. And that was a wonderful, wild journey, which I'm happy to share more about, but came to a lot of peace. It is not a linear process. That stuff gets kicked up all the time. Absolutely. Yeah. Not saying otherwise. But I am decidedly in a different place than I was 7 years ago on that. Right. And from there, in this world, this wonderful world where I got to be the woman you brought on to podcasts and seminars and everything else to talk about masturbation and solo sex and orgasm, I was first introduced to vaginal steaming. And that was another practice that I was actually quite skeptical of at first, and then completely fell in love with and wanted all the gear. I wanted all the products, and I couldn't find them. And so I decided to make them myself.
I love it. I love it. Right. Because the question is like, what's the catalyst that takes us from where we are or where we were to where we are? Right. And it's not necessarily a one-shot deal. And I think that we have this illusion in the most loving way possible that was like the aha is the strike of lightning or the one shot or this is our one opportunity. And it's like, oh, no, but wait, it's more like, right? Because there are lots of ahas and ups and downs. And what, are you kidding me? Like, is this really happening?
Is this really happening? Like, I have been so certain I've understood the light bulb moment and how that will translate and set me up forever. And then years go by and you realize that light bulb moment was actually teaching me something completely different than what I originally thought in the moment it was. And I think this path is one to be engaged and as humble as possible on that realization that, we can feel the alignment, and the alignment is always shifting. It is always something to be aware of.
That's a beautiful point, Kit, because I think that we have, again, an illusion that there's this one set point, right? And that we're supposed to be heading to that exact destination. And it was likely to take us a lifetime, or, once we get there, that's where we stay. And I use the word illusion very intentionally, because I'm sure that had you not, done the intense studies that you did in London, and even, had your sexual assault experience, that, maybe you would not have started at Fever Tree. There wouldn't have been a reason. Maybe you would have been drawn to another path. And then there was something that was probably, and I'm making an assumption here, but an exhale, like, let's just talk about tonic water.
Totally.
Talk about that. That feels like, really, do you want some water? You want some water? Like, let's just talk about that. And that served its purpose for a time. And then, you evolve and you graduate and you say, like, okay, whew, but my purpose is not to talk about tonic water.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Exactly. And both can be true. And this is what I feel like we miss. It's not like I woke up years later and thought, oh my God, what was I thinking? I woke up, what am I thinking now? Because this was absolutely in service of the break that I needed. And I loved and continue to love that company and my colleagues and its mission. It was so great for me until it wasn't, until it was no longer aligned. And that is that constant inner dialogue. And it does not, I just want to say again, it does not mean that there was anything, quote unquote, wrong with the Kit who took that job. I didn't delay where I was going. I just needed that detour because I learned so much through it. And it did give me a break. And that was really great.
Right. It's so interesting because, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about my own experiences and journeys. I mean, there's when I look at the big picture, right, so far, up until this point, my story of significance, and I kind of look at the timeline, like, there's no shock that I ended up as a psychotherapist with my, my past or my history or my trauma or my family of origin, right? There's no shock that I ended up on that. And then there's really no shock, even though at the time that it felt like a big aha, that, I write a book called Own Your Power, because that's something that I had to learn how to do, right? And it's like, then again, it's also no surprise in many ways that, now I have a business where, for now 8 years, where I call the shots, I make the decisions, and I'm helping people. And it's so interesting how, as you bringing it up, and even how I've been synthesizing it for myself, we do have, whether it's trauma or life experiences or family of origin, that sometimes informs what we're drawn to. It's no shock that I help people for a living, when, especially being a person that knew what it felt like to want so desperately for someone to help me. And it felt like I might also have been in a dark cave by myself, right? So I love this conversation and like what's drawn us to this path. And sometimes it's, we're like, oh, now I feel home for right now. Yeah. So tell us about your home right now with Kitara. Like, what are you learning? What are some of the indications that this is aligned for you right now?
Yeah. Well, so thank you for that. Kitara has such a different energy to her than the other enterprises that I've worked with and sort of birthed into the world. And I feel one of the gifts that Kitara brings to me is that I feel like I know her and I really understand her, and I continue to have to listen. I do believe that these ideas, these creations, these businesses are alive. And when I accept that and embrace it and work with them as alive entities, things flow so much better. And there have been times when I have seen the mental clarity on something, and actually is a piece of this. Like I saw in 2012 that we needed to reorient and focus on a North Star of pleasure when it comes to women's sexuality. And yet, that can bring with so many companies could have been born out of that awareness. Instead, I got really mentally fixated on the adult entertainment category because it seemed like it was, one, it's so pervasive. Adult content and pornography is just everywhere, and it is really informing our understanding of sexuality. And so I thought it could have a huge impact. But it wasn't so much where my heart, my Kit heart is. And so I kind of took on this, like, I'm going to do it for the collective. And that was so great in so many ways. And with Kitara, there's a deeper resonance that I feel. And Kitara is really about connecting to the body in a dialogue that unlocks our internal authority through connection with the yoni or womb space or whatever great word feels resonant with you. And that is something that, of all the practices I've studied, there are many that can support this mission. Vaginal yoni steaming is one that I have wild reverence for, its ability to gently be the conduit to this embodied awareness. And I very purposefully use the word gentle because I love that the only way to steam safely is to do so with honoring a dialogue with the body and invite in a prioritization of gentleness, which is not something our culture celebrates. It's often something that's seen as weaker or less than. We work hard, play hard, apparently. I prefer to, work wisely and wonderfully and delightfully, not necessarily hard, and play the same way. And some gentleness in my work and play is really welcomed. It is not how I was raised to believe work and play should be. And it wasn't also how I believe our culture sends women messages about how we contend for our bodies. We instead see these messages of being really hard and harsh with our bodies. And we're also seeing the negative effect of that. And so steaming is just this awesome practice that was done at one point all over the world. So we can all trace our bloodlines back far and far and far enough we go, and we're going to find an ancestor who was connected to this medicine. That is beautiful. The other thing that feels really important to name is that the Black and Indigenous communities of the United States and other countries are really being in leadership of this revival of this medicine in particular. And I'm so grateful to my teachers for that. Steamy Chick, Kelly Garza, his company Steamy Chick, is a great fountain of information around how to steam safely and how to work with a great practitioner or become a practitioner if you want. And Kitara shares lots of information about that too. The safety is, of course, the most important component to me around bringing Kitara through, but she just has such a compassionate, great mama energy to her that's been a real blessing to be in communication with.
Yeah, wow, Kit. As we're talking, and I just I could really feel how arrived that you feel. My perception is that you feel like very arrived in this space, and it's been a journey to have arrived in your body. So, I mean, well, this is a public recording. I'm going to ask you a very personal question. Because I can't help myself. But what does it feel like to have been on the journey that you have, and now in this space, in this moment in time, right now, today, what does it feel like to be embodied?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to take a breath and put my hands on my body as I answer this. it's coming through is just the celebration of that is my reaction to that question. A couple of years ago, it wouldn't have been. And so therefore, to me, it is an ability to work with the mind, but to not place the mind above any other aspect of ourselves. And to really go within, and not just within the mind, but within the actual body, to receive the messages of where we are and aren't finding alignment and joy in our lives. And it's been such a journey. I was so purposely disconnected from my body for a very long time. And that looked like a journey of a lot of numbing mechanisms, including alcohol. And it also looked like the development of a underfunctioning thyroid, which I believe I was literally shutting down my throat, the connection point between my mind and my body, so that I didn't have to feel. And a very common experience in women. And so to be embodied to me means that on a moment to moment basis, I am feeling where my body is holding messages. And oftentimes those messages are gifted to me through some sort of tension, actually, because it's an invitation. That tension is to put some consideration of compassion and love to soften. And when I think through new ideas and new products, and whether or not to accept glorious invitations like this one, it is no longer simply a mental equation. It's one where I check in and can do a body scan and can do various exercises, including steaming and solo sex, to help inform me about how that answer is coming from not just my mind, but also the body. So for me, I feel really centered right now in my body. I feel expansive in my heart. I feel warmth throughout my whole system. And I can acknowledge, my spine and my sits bones on the chair and my feet on the floor. And the different senses that are here for me. So what a beautiful question. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And I appreciate you sharing it so deeply and intimately with us, because I think that it's not something that we often talk about. In most common, hi, how you're doing, conversation is like, what does it feel like to be in your body? We almost look at someone's outward appearance, or even like taking the temperature of like, oh, how are you? Good. Like everybody's good.
Or you look so good.
Right.
And like, what is that about? Like, that can be such a detrimental thing for my body to receive, because it's missing the point. It's like, how are you? How are you feeling? How does your body feel is so different than you look good, which sets us up for the focus on the external appearance, regardless of anything internal that's happening. Which is not to say that we shouldn't all celebrate our beauty. That is a very different thing, which is wonderful and so important. But the emphasis on the exterior and the physical is really where our culture is oriented right now when we talk about the body. And these practices and steaming are an invitation to shift and to really go within in a way that I think is going to be really important for us all as we continue to navigate really our own healing journeys and empowerment.
Right. And I think that happens by way of like the conversations and the communities that we surround ourselves in. There's that old saying, and I probably first heard it in high school, and I'm sure you did too, that you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. I think that has also evolved, and I'd love your input on this, but I think it's also evolved like essentially the 5 biggest influences. So if you're spending a lot of time in Instagram with like compare and despair, what somebody's relationship looks like, their ass or their abs or their house, like, right? And that's the intention, right? So what are those influences that you are calling in? And are you being discerning about what they are. So when you think for you, Kit, like, what are your biggest influences right now, whether it's media or music or your community, the voices that you're listening to? Like, what would you say are your like 5 of your biggest influences?
Yeah, thank you for that. And to consider that technology has really shifted that old adage, hasn't it? Thank you for presencing that. You know, we spend now so much time not in physical relationship with people, but heavily influenced by different platforms and individuals on those platforms. Instagram is something that I've noticed was not an aligned thing for me to be one of my 5 biggest influencers in my life. And so about 6 months ago, I just started deleting the app. Every time I pulled it up to post something, I would then delete it and then bring it on again. iPhone has now a new update where you can really put it in like a back page, which means I'm on it more than sometimes I would like. But I also try to bring this awareness toward it. And I can feel in my body when I've been on it too long. And it shifted from being this wonderful opportunity to connect with people and to support people and to share my voice into I am in comparison, self-shaming mode. I don't feel good enough all of a sudden. And I'm feeling this like addictive need to keep scrolling. These are indications that usually come from my center, my like navel point. And that's when it's time to find the strength to put it away because it's no longer of service. It has completely shifted. It's energetic. My husband is somebody I spend a lot of time with in person, and he has had a tremendously positive impact in being seen through his eyes. And he is so loving. And sometimes he like kicks up a wounded version of me that doesn't even want to believe him or wants to challenge him and sort of say like, well, you just think that because you love me. And he is like, yeah, I love you and you're beautiful and wonderful. And that is why I think that you're doing great things in the world. You know, just like, I'm like, oh, that didn't work. So he has been somebody who's helped me access deeper levels of love and compassion for myself. And I am eternally grateful to him for that. I also am so grateful for nature. I don't get out enough. I am still in my own process of unwinding, but we have intentions to really spend more time in our gardens this summer and in future summers as well. I don't want to overly ride myself on this. So this summer, I'm just putting the intention that I want to have a couple of pots of herbs that are particularly well suited for steaming and 1 bed for vegetables. And that's it. And that way I'm setting myself up for something that feels really both aspirational and achievable. And then in future years, we can have chickens and bees and feed the whole neighborhood with our tomatoes and kale. But we'll work towards that. And then I have just an incredible array of women that I get to walk through life with. And I consider them the deepest soul sisters, and the web is ever growing and ever inviting me into deeper levels of myself and to connect with more and more women globally. And I am so grateful for that. The way in which, you know, we can connect. Listeners, Bailey and I spoke about a month ago about just checking in so that we could really be situated and oriented with each other while we record this conversation. And that was so wonderful and had so much intention to it. And we really got to connect, you know, through the heart. And I am so blessed because I have what feels like sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of women in my life who I get to connect with like that. So sisterhood, nature, husband, and I utilize technology for sure. I mean, technology is a huge influence, and it's up to me to take some self-responsibility on keeping it within that zone of connectivity and sharing good and supporting others rather than the shadow sides. So I think it feels very important to me. My parents, who are huge influencers, as well as flowers, which are huge influencers in my life as well. So if I can spend some time with flowers, then it's a good day. And my parents are people who have supported me through every twist and turn of this, including, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to start an adult entertainment company.
Right. Like, how do you have that conversation?
So they're pretty great. Yeah.
Oh,
and of course, my dog just perked up and then flomped with like, you didn't name me, and I was going to. And he's amazing, and he completely got me through quarantine, because otherwise it was just all screens. Thankfully, my lovely husband, but he's at work a lot, and my pup.
Right. Oh, Kit, I love that. I love that. And for us to like, it's both I think the nod of gratitude to our influences, and then also the acknowledgement of like, these are the parts that make the recipe of me right now.
Yeah.
Right now. And there's certainly things in there that are like, actually, these are pretty constant. Like, these are some standard pantry staples here that I'm going to keep.
Yeah.
And to understand that there's an ebb and flow. And I love. And I'm sure like everyone who's listening can appreciate your perspective of, the garden. Like, I'm going to do something that's doable, because for people that are wired like me and like you can be sometimes, right? Like, we can all be. It's like, so I'm going to have a garden. And then there's going to be chickens, and they're going to get along. And then we're going to have a goat, a pygmy goat. Maybe we'll get two, so they have friends. And then there will be bees. I'm going to beekeeping school, because I'm going to have a bee.
Great. And then maybe I can sell my honey and coordinate with my friend who already does sell honey and like support that business.
Right. Now we have a honey co-op.
Have like an egg co-op share, and we can design them in the ways that my Irish ancestors did.
It's yes, so true.
And then it's like, maybe plant a pot of lavender.
Achievable, doable. I can still sleep and maintain my life at the same time. I don't need to get a trademark attorney or worry about like intellectual property violations or, any of those things. Just going to do a little lavender for this first year.
Yeah.
Right. And there's something so beautiful about being a rookie. There's something so beautiful about it being the first or being the start. So, all right, my love, as we wrap up, I want to ask you, what is next for you as you elevate your life?
Oh, wow. Well, super vulnerable, because this is up to the cosmos that we're working and hoping to have children soon. And so, that is my new moon prayer and my prayer now for many months, and going forward, that's our deepest hope and desire.
Beautiful. Yes, I think it is. It's a blend between like honoring where the journey that we've been on, paying respect to where we are right at this exact moment and just being present in it. And then also like having a little twinkle in our eye for where we're headed next. I think it's all three of those things that come together. That's just like, and this is me for right now.
Right. And sometimes people try to say there's a conflict there. And when I say that, I mean, sometimes parts of my mind says that there's a conflict there. Those people, I mean me, who looks at things and is worried that I'm not content now if I'm looking also forward. And I have to remind myself that those things don't need to be at odds with one another. And it takes some intentionality and a lot of compassion and understanding to hold both, but it's doable. And I feel like I've understood that that's doable through being around other women who can reflect that back to me. Like, you can experience the joy in your current life while also having these desires for your future.
Yeah, not this or that. It's and. Awesome. So what would you say, last question, my love, is what's the last piece of advice that you would want to give to other people that are looking to elevate in their life?
Well, I think particularly with this conversation and really where I'm at in my work right now, it's the invitation to consider the body and to consider her as your greatest asset in life, and not something to override or to punish, certainly not, but an invitation to connect and to see what wisdom there is in store, and to be so patient with yourself on that exploration. So patient.
I love that. I love that. Absolutely. I think patience is key. And it's not something, at least for me, it's not something that's my default setting. Right?
No way.
Right. Like, yep, so speaks for me.
I want like 5-year-olds.
True story. Yeah. True story. Right. It's something that we cultivate over time. And I think that we especially come to a place of peace with cultivating our patience as we get more grounded and connected and inside our body.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, so beautifully said. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Miss Kit Maloney, where would we find you on the internet, on the World Wide Web? As people are looking, they want to steam, they want to check you out, they want to know all the things. Where are they finding you?
So you can go to kitaralove.com. And if and when it's aligned for you to purchase a steam seat, please use the code RISELOVE for $10 off. And you can also find us on Instagram at BYKitara by Kitara. And those are the 2 places I'm hanging out. So Kitara Love is really small in this phase. So you can always email info@KitaraLove, and that's me.
I love it. You send an email and you're going to have a human being answer it.
You're going to have a human being. Absolutely. Exactly.
Loving it. Loving it. Awesome. We'll put all that good stuff in the show notes. And again, thanks for joining us for today.
Thank you, Bailey.
Bye.